video, we're going to be showing you a extreme 3D Sisu, which is the dragon from the new movie Raya and the Last Dragon. And Sisu is all pinks and like aquas and slightly blue and purples. So absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous design, except for the fact that it is like the dragon version of Elsa. And as soon as I read that, that's all I can see, and now it's haunting me. But I still love it. It's still gorgeous. I think the black outline of the eyes on Sisu was maybe the place where I think it went a little too Elsa reminiscent, but in general, I do love this design. So I hope you guys like the design of the nail as much as I do. The pink marble background is one of the favorite backgrounds I have ever done, and I want it on my nails desperately. It's so neon and vibrant. I hope you guys love it as much as I do. If you missed my Raya nail, I did that one yesterday, and I'll put a link to it in the description box below, so check back for that, and I will see you guys next time. Bye! Okay, so you guys, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but in the intro that Melody and I did, she handed me a booger. And I didn't know what she was doing because I couldn't see her face. And then I was like, I just, brushed it off at the time, but I just watched that and I almost died. But yeah, that was fun. And if anyone is wondering what it's like to live with a toddler, that is basically a perfect explanation, which is really kind of horrible, but whatever. It is what it is. So on this nail, we're going to start with a little swirly ombre of light pink into a really rich berry color, and then add some swirls of white into there, and then a little bit of a flaky iridescent mix that I have. And I'm going to encapsulate this with a layer of clear acrylic. And on this nail, doing a layer of clear acrylic, much like the Raya one, I did it in stages instead of trying to do it all at once and, killing myself in the process. No, just try to do it in, 4 beads I think is a perfectly acceptable amount for a nail of this length. My brush, I was using a size 8, which is really quite small for this nail. And, to do something with that many, 4 beads I thought was, a good amount. So don't ever try to force yourself to do things too quickly with acrylic because it doesn't end well if you do. So now on a nail form backing, we're going to be sculpting Miss Sisu, and we're going to start with her head, which is a very light aqua color. And then we're going to be doing, she's got this like almost lion's mane fur that comes off of her top of her head and then flows down her neck. So that's the next layer that we're going to be doing. And the fur that comes, the long flowing mane is a mix of purple and a light blue. So when you're doing that, I grabbed a double color or a dual color bead of acrylic each time so that I had a mix pretty much no matter where it was. And the ratio of blue to purple, you can kind of change it a little bit. So it's not always like 50-50. It can be a little bit heavier on purple and then a little heavier on blue and then a 50-50, just so that there looks like there's some really smooth variegation throughout the patterning of her fur. And it is very like flowy and luxurious too. So add some little like feather type strokes off to the side and keep adding layers to it. This is one of those designs where you have to know that patience is going to come in handy because it is time consuming. This particular Sisu is, there's so much detail in new animation that I find it very hard to make the designs small because I want to try to incorporate as much of that detail that is there as possible because it is so beautiful and I hate to leave things out. And when you want to include all of that lovely detail, making them nail size is difficult. So recently my theory has been make the nails really big. And not everything that I'm doing is going to be like that. But guys, know that for the next couple videos coming up, I have made some really big kind of extreme over the top stuff. So, buckle your seatbelts. It's going to get interesting around here because I'm working outside the nail shape recently. So we've got Sisu's body, and her body is so very long. It's very serpenty, very long and very fluid looking. We aren't going to be doing her entire body because it would be too much. So we're going to just have to make a cutoff place. And when you do that, I would recommend just kind of making an angled line and just cutting it off wherever it feels like the right spot and just going with it and not worrying about it if it cuts off at kind of a weird place because there's only so much that you can do. And I would say we have about 25% of Sisu in this design because her body is so long and she has a really long tail and we only have 2 of her legs and but we have the important part. We have that mane and her face. The one thing that I am kind of sad that we don't have in this is that she has this vertical scale that goes down her back and down her body that is this kind of like wavy pattern and it's just really pretty. And that was one thing I would probably have wanted to add into here that I didn't get. But we have one of her hands, or her claws, arms, whatever you want to call this, is up a little bit, so then you can see her little toenails, which are teal, which I thought was really cool. And so we're going to be doing those. We can't forget those. And we're going to do the one hand that is going to show with this particular pose. I had a super hard time finding reference photos. I said this for Raya too, but for Sisu especially, because when I did this design, Sisu's image hadn't actually been released to the public. Like the actual final one, there was some like spec drawings, but not the real one wasn't actually available to see. So what I ended up doing is I went to a movie theater's wholesale website that I could see posters and standees that they could order. And I could get this I got a picture of a standee from this wholesale website that a movie theater could purchase if they wanted as a promotional item. And that was how I ended up getting this. So this was the only image I could use when I sculpted this. And then like a week later, there was a lot available. And I was like, well, that's convenient. I should have just waited a week. But I was kind of gung-ho to get this done. So there we have it. But I love this design and I love this shape that we have for her. So as you can see, I'm going through and I'm adding another layer to her chest, to the fur on her chest, to give it just a little bit more depth. The first layer I did was just to kind of get the general shape down, especially when you're working on top of a nail form backing or anything that is slippery, because they have that nice slick surface so the acrylic pops off. You are going to find that your acrylic is going to be hard to get some of this finer texture in. And so the great thing that I like to do is to do a base layer and get just sort of a start of the shapes down, and then go back through and do a second layer with a texture, because the acrylic will create this, the little hair-like shapes over the top of another layer of acrylic. So now with some teal, I'm going to be adding a little bit of shading on the back of her arm and then her back as well. And the one thing that another thing I suppose I should say, not the one thing, but another thing I did not include in this is that her two horns and all the way down her back has this swirly pattern on it. And I did not include that because I didn't think that there was quite enough space to really do it justice. But if you wanted to do this and do like a set of these and have a different nail, doing a nail that was just like a teal ombre and then having that swirly pattern over the top of it would be beautiful. Going back to her face, I'm going to be adding a lot more depth to it. So she has a snout that comes out, and then she has a little dip in for her eye sockets, and then the bridge of her nose is almost rectangular in shape. So you're going to need to carve in and sculpt in and press your brush this way and that to get those different shapes to work in. And as you're doing this, have patience. I know that I can't say that enough, but just don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to get it perfect the first time. And if you don't, this would be a design that, especially those facial features, would be perfect for a 4D gel product if you prefer to use that, because it'll give you that nice height to the shapes really easily. Otherwise, a high quality, reliable gel product that works really well for creating 3D is the next best thing. And for me, I used Double Dip's, I think it's called Emerald, to sculpt my Sisu's face, and that works beautifully. Double Dip's products create 4D things like this fairly effortlessly, and the results are nice and smooth. So if you have products that you can trust like that, then that's a great thing just to have on hand. So we're going to go back down. I'm going to sculpt her little toenails with that teal acrylic that I'm using, and I'm going to do a toenail on each toe, and this is the same color that I used to shade in her arm and her back and to add her horns. So it's that same teal color that I'm using all around. If I had one that was slightly darker of a teal, that probably would have been better, but you got to use what you have. So this one I have is definitely adequate. And we're going to be doing the second horn, the smaller one that's in front of the first one, and that one does sit down on her forehead a little bit more. The first one is tucked into her mane. In fact, after I have this other horn sculpted, I'll go through and I'll add a little bit more of the mane hair going in front of and around that first horn, the longer one. So we've got that done there. And then, like I said, with a little bit more of the purple, I'm going to be doing some of that little hair wispies going around her horn. And just keep adding details until you're happy with it. Once you're happy with, the majority of it and things are fairly set up, I'm going to sculpt her eyes with white. This would be something that if you don't prefer to sculpt them, paint them, go for it, a-okay. But for me, in this particular
situation, sculpting them seemed to be the right way to go with it. So I'm going to take my white acrylic and just press those down and get them into that really, really nice, very Elsie eye shape. And I know I say that, but if you compare side-by-side images of Sisu and Elsa, the resemblance is uncanny. Like if you think, oh, if Elsa were to shapeshift into a dragon, this is exactly what it would be. Although the funny thing is I saw a preview where Sisu did shapeshift and looks nothing like Elsa. The end result, her shapeshifting into a human form, was not Elsie. But, you know, there's always different weird things that happen. So then we have the eyes, and we're going to go back to her eyes with the outline of the black. So she's got these really, you know, intently winged, lashed outlines on her eyes. And it just, like I said, I thought that the outlines seemed a little bit kind of out of place on her character when I think I mentioned that in the intro. And I think the reason it seemed so out of place to me is because they were black, and the rest of her is so like very light and airy. And then she's got these few facial features that are so intense. She's got the white outlines on her eyes, and then black outlines on her eyes, really black nostrils, and a super black smile. So it just is so intense against all those pastels. But then we're going to glue her down to the nail and secure the back of it with some clear acrylic to make sure it doesn't pop off. And when I did this, I glued Sisu to the opposite side that I glued Raya. So if you hold them side by side, they won't overlap. So when you're doing that, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind to place them so that they won't cling against each other. And really make sure that you add clear acrylic over the wispy little bits of her mane that are coming off the back so that they don't, you know, snap off or break off. And go through and just add clear acrylic under anything that sticks up. And now we're going to be adding all the details with acrylic paint. So most of this acrylic paint detail is pretty, you know, almost like shading and like washing of color. So I have a teal color of paint that I'm going to use to add some shading on her face and on her arms and her chest and a little bit on her hand. Just kind of go through and add some depth, even more than was already there. And then with a very intense shade of blue, I'm going to be adding some shading to her mane. So under her chin, like under her head where the shadow would be there, just adding a little wash of that color. And then here and there throughout the rest of the mane off the back of her head, just little streaks of that darker blue color, as well as adding that darker blue onto her horns because they needed a bit more of a shade on them. And then a lavender paint for her eyes with a little bit of that dark blue, sort of just kind of outlining the iris to give it a lot of dimension. Like I said, these characters are so well created and so much detail in them that the more you look, the more you see. So there's even details of her iris pattern and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then you're also going to need to add the little black pupil. I'm going to fix up her crazy black eyelashes. I can't get over it, you guys. It just seemed, when I was sculpting it, I was like, this just seems so out of place to me. But I wasn't asked when they were designing the characters, so, you know, I'm sure they had their reasons. And then we're going to do the black smile for her and her little black nostrils, and just keep going through and adding all the details that you need to. I did actually do her eyebrows with black, even though they aren't black. They are dark teal, but I felt like if I just did them with teal, they wouldn't show up well enough, and it would be a little bit almost like they wouldn't show at all because you'd be so distracted by her lash line. We're going to add some highlights here and there with some diluted white just to kind of bring out some of the colors a little bit more and bring out some of the shapes. So I did that on her horns and then on her arms and a little bit here and there on her hair, touch on her nose. And then we're going to be applying a layer of gel sealer over the background. Make sure that all of that pink gets nice and glossy. I love that background color so much. And then cure it, and then some matte top coat over Sisu. And then this nail is done. If you guys did miss my Raya nail, like I said before, I will put a link to it in the description box below. I just love the contradiction between these two nails and just their overall tone and color scheme. I hope you guys love them as much as I do, and look forward to some of those other crazy nails I have planned because, like I said, there's a couple coming up that are pretty intense. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!